He's such a boring loser, I deserve better. That was the sentence that detonated a 27-year marriage, spoken loud and clear, right in front of 40 guests at our daughter's graduation dinner. My name is Greg Mallory, 53, and I've spent the last 2 decades making sure freight moves where it should, on time, every time, for Redwood Construction here in Des Moines. I'm the fixer. I solve problems. But nothing prepared me for my wife Trisha standing up during dessert and declaring I wasn't enough anymore. Not as a man, not as a husband, not even as a father. Everyone at the table froze. My sister Claire dropped her fork. My brother-in-law Mark set down his beer like it had turned to acid. But the worst part, the look on my daughter's face. Melanie, 22 and just graduated with honors, stared at her mother like she'd just watched a stranger speak through her. And yet, I wasn't shocked. Not really. I hadn't known she'd go public like this, but I'd felt it coming for months, since the day Trisha started working out with that tan personal trainer named Logan. New clothes. Night, sessions. Talk of rediscovering herself. So when she made her big scene that night, I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just reached into my jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope with her name on it. Everything changed after that. Trisha stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Around us, the clink of cutlery and low hum of conversation had vanished, replaced by a heavy, stunned silence. Even the server who had been pouring wine just stood there, bottle frozen mid-air. Go on, I said quietly. Since we're sharing tonight, let's go ahead and open that. With shaky hands, Trisha peeled it open and pulled out the documents. 3 neatly folded sheets I'd printed the night before. The first page was enough. Her face shifted from smug confidence to confusion, then realization, then panic. She looked up at me, and I knew she finally understood. Her voice dropped, barely audible. Greg, what is this? Read it out loud, I said. Let's not keep everyone in suspense. Trisha hesitated. Her show had gone off script. She glanced over her shoulder at Logan, the personal trainer/homewrecker standing awkwardly by the bar, pretending not to know her. A man built for flexing, not for confrontation. She turned back to the papers, flipping to the second page, and that's when her hands began to shake. Melanie leaned in toward me. Dad, what's going on? I looked at her steady and calm. Just a little insurance policy, sweetheart. Something to make sure this night doesn't cost us more than it already has. I should probably explain. Trisha and I met in college. She was the wild, adventurous one, always chasing some new dream. I was the reliable one, got my degree in logistics, landed a stable job with Redwood Construction, and made a decent living doing work most people overlook but can't live without. We married at 25, built a modest life, had Melanie. Trisha worked odd jobs here and there. PR marketing, a stint in real estate. Nothing stuck. She said she was figuring herself out. I figured things out by working 60-hour weeks and socking away enough to put our daughter through school. For a while it worked. Until Melanie left for college. That's when Trisha changed. First came the gym membership. Then new clothes, a new phone. A whole new vocabulary. Self-actualization, empowerment, spiritual growth. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. I worked too much. I didn't see her. I wasn't evolving. Then came Logan. He was everything I wasn't. Loud, tanned, younger. And stupid enough to think no one would notice the way he lingered when picking her up from sessions, or how he just happened to show up wherever we went. When I found a hotel receipt tucked into a coat pocket, the kind of thing a person forgets they're even hiding, I didn't confront her. I called my old Little League buddy Carl, who happened to be a lawyer, and I started planning. First, I located the postnuptial agreement Trisha had signed 5 years earlier when we refinanced the house. She had insisted we move into a home that reflects our potential, which meant more square footage and a bigger mortgage. Her lawyer advised her to sign the agreement. She did, without much thought. Next, I created a trust in Melanie's name, moving a majority of our assets there, legally and within the boundaries of the agreement. The house, the cabin upstate, the boat, and our savings, protected. Not hidden, just redirected. I wasn't being cruel, I was being prepared. So when Trisha stood up in front of our family, puffed with righteousness, ready to declare her independence and new romance with Logan as some kind of personal victory, I didn't interrupt. I waited, until now. You can't do this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You can't just... I didn't do anything that wasn't spelled out in that agreement, I said. You remember the one, right? You had a lawyer look at it. So did I. Signed, witness, notarized. Her jaw clenched. She turned to Logan again, maybe hoping for some support. But the man was already retreating, trying to blend into the background. Tell them. Trisha hissed. Tell them what we talked about. Logan took a slow step forward. Baby, maybe we should just go. Her face fell. This wasn't the Logan she imagined would rescue her. This was the guy who liked her when she was fun and secret, not a woman unraveling at a dinner party in front of family. Oh, you can go, I said to him, but Trisha might want to finish reading, especially page 3. She flipped to the last page, and all color drained from her face. The house, she murmured. In Melanie's name, I said. A's of yesterday. The cabin, too. And the boat. All of it. I figured if we're hitting the reset button, I might as well clean the slate. You bastard, she snapped. Her voice rang across the room, sharp and brittle. Heads turned. Gasps were muffled. You played me. No, I replied. You played yourself. I just stopped letting you write the rules. The silence that followed Trisha's outburst wasn't awkward. It was deafening, like the moment after a lightning strike when the air itself holds its breath. And in that moment, I knew the performance was over. The mask had slipped, and all that was left behind was a woman exposed, unprepared, and furious that she'd lost control of her own script. Logan mumbled something and retreated toward the exit, avoiding eye contact with everyone. He hadn't expected to be part of a drama this loud, this public, or this final. Trisha called after him, but it was half-hearted. Her attention had swung back to me and the neatly folded documents in her trembling hand. You moved everything into a trust. You hid our assets. She hissed, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. No, I said evenly. I protected them. For our daughter. For the only person at this table who didn't lie to me. Melanie's eyes flicked between us, but she didn't say a word. She looked stunned, but not shocked. Maybe part of her had seen this coming too. Maybe she'd just never expected her mom to make it this ugly, this fast. You had no right? Trisha continued, her volume rising again.
This is our life. Owe you our money.
I calmly leaned back in my chair. It stopped being ours when you started booking hotel rooms under your maiden name. There it was. A collective exhale from the room. Proof. Undeniable and spoken aloud. Across the table. Trisha's mother, Marilyn, looked at her daughter with disbelief, then turned to me, her eyes apologetic. Greg, I didn't know. I nodded. I know. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. But Trisha made that decision for me. Trisha pushed her chair back violently. You blindsided me? She spat. In front of everyone? I gave her a cold smile. You stood up at our daughter's graduation dinner and called me a loser. If you want privacy, maybe don't launch a breakup speech over Crere mi brel, eh? Lauder broke out, nervous, uncertain, from someone near the end of the table. It didn't matter who. The spell had broken. The room wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. I'm going to contest all of this, she growled. You think some stupid trust and a prenup are going to hold up? I'll take it to court. I nodded thoughtfully. Of course you can. But I suggest you read page 3 again. Specifically the section with the state notary's seal and the clause about no contest provisions. And while you're at it, ask your lawyer what happens when you attempt to challenge a binding postnup after committing adultery. Her mouth opened, then closed. I stood up slowly and straightened my blazer. I think we're done here. Melanie, I turned to my daughter. If you'd still like to grab dessert, I'll be at the cafe across the street in 15. She nodded once, quietly, then looked back at her mother, her expression unreadable. As I turned and walked out of the restaurant, I could feel the weight of every eye in the room on my back. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Outside, the evening air was cool. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. The noise, the tension, the betrayal, it was behind me now. My steps felt lighter than they had in months. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder labeled Plan B. Inside were backups of every document. Photos, emails, screenshots, receipts, all time-stamped, organized, and stored in the cloud. I'd been careful, I'd been deliberate, and I'd been quiet. Some would say I should have yelled, fought, made a scene. But I believe in still power, the kind that doesn't have to raise its voice to be heard. And now it was Trisha's turn to learn what consequences feel like when you gamble with someone who doesn't bluff. Back at the cafe, I ordered 2 slices of pie and a coffee. 10 minutes later, Melanie walked in. She didn't say anything at first. Just slid into the seat across from me, set down her purse, and looked me straight in the eyes. "I knew," she said. "Not everything. But I knew something was off." I nodded slowly. "I tried to shield you." She took a deep breath. "Thank you for not making this mess mine to clean up." We ate our pie in silence. The kind of silence that says we're okay. The kind that doesn't need to fill space with noise. Outside, the streetlights blinked on one by one. Inside, something between us had quietly mended. The fallout didn't come with fireworks or slamming doors. It came the next morning, in the form of 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, and a 14-paragraph email from Trisha that started with, "I was emotional last night," and ended with, "I hope we can talk." Just the 2 of us. I didn't respond. By noon, she tried a new approach. "Pity. You blindsided me, Greg. I didn't realize how far gone you were emotionally. You were always so cold. You never fought for us." I still didn't reply. But by the 3rd day, she dropped the pretense. "I deserve part of that house. You can't just cut me off financially." That's when I forwarded everything to Carl, my lawyer friend who had helped set up the trust, and walked me through every dotted line of that postnup. Carl replied with a simple, solid, "Let her sue. She'll lose." Trisha didn't handle silence well. She thrived on reaction, on drama, on being the loudest voice in the room. But now there was no audience, no spotlight, and worst of all, no leverage. By the end of the week, I got a call from her mother, Marilyn. "Greg, I know things are messy, but she's my daughter, and she's not well." I didn't argue. I respected Marilyn. She'd always been gracious to me, even when Trisha turned every family event into a performative showcase. "I understand," I said, "but this isn't about anger anymore. It's about peace. For me. For Melanie." She paused. "You were always too good for her." That stayed with me longer than I expected. Meanwhile, Logan, Mr. Tan, and tight shirts had ghosted Trisha completely. Melanie told me she'd seen his Instagram rebrand overnight from personal trainer and nutrition coach to life coach and mindset strategist. No photos of Trisha, just cheesy quotes over filtered beach pics. I didn't laugh. I just turned off my phone and went back to painting the fence at the cabin. A few weeks later, the formal divorce filing arrived at my office, delivered not by Trisha herself, but by her new attorney. She claimed emotional distress, financial hardship, and coercive financial restructuring. Carl laughed out loud. "She's throwing spaghetti at the wall, Greg. Let it hit the tile." He drafted a polite but firm response, outlining the trust structure, citing the notary-signed postnup, and highlighting the breach of fidelity clause. Then he added the final touch, a reminder that any attempt to publicly defame me or involve Melanie would result in an immediate countersuit for libel, defamation, and emotional harm. Trisha didn't respond after that, and just like that, the noise stopped. Melanie came by more often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit on the porch and talk. She asked questions, hard ones. "Did you ever love her?"
Yes. When did you stop?
"When she stopped seeing me as enough." She nodded, quiet. "I always thought the 2 of you were weirdly perfect," she said. "You were calm, she was not." I thought it worked. "It did," I said, "until it didn't." Summer turned to fall. The house grew quieter but felt lighter. I started reading again, books that had sat unread for years. I fixed the leaky faucet, planted new grass, and taught myself how to make sourdough from scratch. Trisha, word had it she took a job as a part-time fitness instructor at a gym outside town. Not the kind of place with hot yoga and smoothie bars. A no-frills chain next to a laundromat and a payday loan place. Logan was long gone. She texted me once in October. Said she missed the smell of the cabin after a rainstorm. I didn't reply. Because some things aren't invitations, they're echoes. One morning, Melanie showed up with an envelope. "I think you should see this," she said. Inside was a letter, handwritten. Trisha's handwriting, shaky and unfamiliar. It was an apology, not perfect, not even fully honest. But it was something. She admitted to chasing a version of herself that never existed. To blaming me for her restlessness. To not realizing what she had until it was gone. But most importantly, she said she hoped Melanie didn't inherit her mistakes. That last part hit me. I sat with the letter for a long time. Then folded it and tucked it away in the back of my desk drawer. Not to forget, but to file away. Like a receipt from a chapter closed. The final step came 6 weeks later, in a downtown courtroom with scuffed floors and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look a little more tired than they probably were. Trisha arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in a charcoal gray suit 2 sizes too ambitious. She avoided eye contact with me as she sat down beside her new attorney, a guy who looked fresh out of law school, carrying more confidence than case history. I didn't bring anyone. Carl had already reviewed every document, prepared every counterpoint, and advised me there was no need for drama. If she pushes, we push back. If she folds, we walk away clean. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, flipped through the file with a raised brow and asked Trisha's counsel, "You're contesting a fully executed postnuptial agreement with a fidelity clause after your client admitted to a relationship with another party." Trisha's lawyer tried to spin it: emotional coercion, financial imbalance, some babble about psychological entrapment. But it unraveled fast. When the judge asked if Trisha had been pressured to sign the agreement, she hesitated. "No, Your Honor. But I didn't realize what I was agreeing to." The judge didn't blink. "You're an adult. You had legal representation. You initialed every page and signed in front of a notary. That's not confusion. That's consent." I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just sat there, still as stone, while the truth did what it always does, eventually rise. After 30 minutes, the judge dismissed her claim. The trust stood. The assets remained under Melanie's name. No spousal support was awarded, and the court costs were split, exactly as outlined in the original postnup. As we left the courtroom, Trisha stopped me in the hallway. Her face had lost its sharpness. She looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. "You really planned this all out, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. "I didn't plan for things to fall apart, Trisha. But I wasn't going to let you burn the whole house down just because you got cold." She swallowed hard. "Is there anything left to say?" I looked at her, this woman I had once promised forever to, and I said quietly, "No, we said too much already." She nodded and walked away. And that was the last time we spoke. Life after that was quieter, simpler in the best way. I went back to working part-time with Redwood Construction, consulting on large-scale logistics while mentoring the younger guys who thought efficiency was just a buzzword. Turns out, decades of experience still counted for something when the chips were down. Melanie stayed in town. She found a job in urban development, working on city infrastructure projects, and using her engineering degree for something meaningful. Every Friday night, she'd come over for dinner. We'd cook, talk, sometimes sit in silence. She told me once, "I learned more about grace from how you handled Mom than I did from any sermon growing up." That one stuck with me. I started volunteering on weekends, fixing up bikes for underprivileged kids, helping at the food pantry, planting trees for the county's green initiative. Not because I needed to stay busy, but because I finally had the space to give without being drained. The house didn't feel empty. It felt honest. And the cabin up north, that place became my refuge. I'd take a thermos of coffee, drive out on weekends, and spend hours walking the trails, chopping wood, or sitting on the porch while the fog rolled in over the hills. One morning, I found an old photo tucked inside a book I hadn't touched in years. It was of Trisha and me at our wedding. Me in a suit too big, her in a dress too bold, both of us smiling like we knew something the world didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't feel regret. I just slid it back between the pages and placed the book back on the shelf. Some things belong to the past, not because they were failures, but because they were finished. One evening, Melanie and I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the trees. She asked,
I thought about it.
"I miss who she used to be, not who she became." She nodded slowly.
I think I get that.
The wind picked up, and I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, just like I used to when she was little. "I'm proud of you, Dad." I didn't say anything right away. Just smiled, knowing that in the end I hadn't lost a marriage. I had reclaimed a life. Several months passed with a kind of peace I hadn't known in decades. My routine was solid early morning walks, part-time consulting work from home, and evenings spent tending the garden or fixing up the cabin property. I didn't hear from Trisha again, not directly. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she'd moved in with a friend in a nearby suburb and started working full-time at a fitness center that mostly served retirees. That was all I needed to know. One chilly morning in November, I received a formal envelope from my attorney's office. It wasn't a surprise, I'd been waiting on it. Inside was the finalized divorce decree, stamped, sealed and irrevocable, no more negotiations. No more back and forths, it was done. I set it down on the dining room table and stared at it. There was no celebration, no music swelling in the background like in a movie, just the quiet tick of the wall clock and the sound of leaves blowing across the porch. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't bitter. I was just free. A few days later, Melanie asked if I wanted to join her for a charity auction her firm was sponsoring. It wasn't really my scene, but I said yes. She was proud of her work, and showing up mattered. At the event, I ended up talking to a woman named Diane Carter, a retired high school principal who volunteered part-time with Melanie's company. She was sharp, witty, and surprisingly good at guessing people's backstories, with nothing more than small talk and posture. We laughed over coffee and talked about everything from classic books to bad 80s music. I didn't think much of it at the time, just a pleasant conversation. But the next week, she called. Melanie said, "You might be good company for a Saturday hike." And so we hiked. 1 mile became 2. 2 turned into lunch. Lunch became weekend plans. Diane wasn't like Trisha, not in energy, not in rhythm, not in goals. But she was kind. She listened with intention, she asked good questions. And most of all, she didn't need fixing or performing. She showed up as she was, and let me do the same. We took it slow, we kept things simple. No big declarations, no timelines, just connection. Back at home, I finally cleared out the spare room, the one that used to hold boxes of Trisha's seasonal decorations and old photo albums. I donated the clutter, kept a few meaningful pieces for Melanie, and turned the room into a reading space. A big armchair, a proper lamp, shelves with all the books I'd always meant to read but never had the quiet to enjoy. That room became a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. Not just space, but purpose. Stillness, control over my own narrative. The neighbors noticed the changes. "You seem lighter," one of them said. Happier even, and I was. Not because I had someone new, not because I'd won some invisible battle, but because I had finally made peace with what I couldn't save, and focused on what I could still build. Melanie thrived. She got promoted. She moved into a little townhome closer to downtown, but she still called every Sunday evening without fail. We talked about work, life, and sometimes about nothing at all. Just the act of staying connected was enough. That winter, I hosted Christmas for the first time in years. Just a few close friends, Diane, Melanie, and her boyfriend. No drama, no performance. Just laughter, warmth, and good food. It wasn't the life I once imagined. It was better, because it was honest, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to defend my worth, earn my peace, or justify why I stayed so long in a love that stopped being loving. I had been the constant in someone else's storm for so long, I forgot what calm felt like. Now, I lived in it daily. Some scars don't show up on skin. They show up in the quiet moments when you realize you stayed too long, gave too much, and asked too little in return. But healing is learning to be alone without being lonely. It's learning to choose peace over proof and dignity over drama. I didn't get revenge. I didn't make a scene. I made space. And in that space, I rebuilt not just my routine, but myself. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: you are not obligated to stay where love becomes leverage. Protect your heart like you'd protect your home. Secure it, value it, and never let someone kick down the door because they feel entitled to what's inside. To anyone out there quietly carrying disappointment, betrayal, or regret, know this: your stillness is not weakness. It's strategy. It's strength. If this story reminded you of a chapter in your own life, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else needs tonight. And if you believe in stories of quiet redemption, hard-won peace, and the strength it takes to walk away with grace, subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories others whisper about with the dignity they deserve. You're not alone. Not anymore.